Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I come to you on a very stormy day here in Florida. Maybe the weather knows that Donald Trump looks like he's going to get the Republican nomination. Now, of course, we're going to talk probably the whole show about that, but we did have finally a big storm roll through the Pinellas County, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Tampa area. It'd been beautiful. No rain for a couple weeks, not a cloud in the sky. Just that kind of stereotypical weather people think of when they think of Florida. At least when we're not getting hurricanes. Otherwise, the perception is it's pretty sunny here. It was kind of like that for a couple weeks. It was getting warmer day by day. And then this morning, we just had this monster of a thing, red blob of stuff roll over the area, and it's kind of still here as I'm recording this show. It's raining out. Cars are going by. There's big puddles in the streets, and so it's a little bit different than the last few weeks have been. And I'm hoping that in recording this show that my computer doesn't lose power, because right now as I'm recording this, I have no internet. And it's one of the things you don't realize living here is that I technically live on an island. Very technically. Yes, there are bridges over here, but without the bridges, I am surrounded entirely by water. If the bridges didn't exist, I would have to swim or take a boat or fly to the mainland from where I am. Now, granted, that span is only in some places like 100 yards or maybe a little bit more than that. But I do live on an island, and because of that, the power that we get out here, as I've told you, living in Las Vegas for 13 years, I'm going to say the power might have gone out 5 times in 13 years. That's pretty impressive for it only being that much, given how much electricity is used, given the, of course, not the rain and thunder or lightning that we had there, which wasn't much, but the sandstorms you get there, and just the wear that the heat and the sun can put on electrical components. That it only went out 5 times in 13 years is something. Because it's not unusual here, where I live now in Madeira Beach, Florida, for the power to go out 5 times in 1 month. It's just different. I'm going to say it's probably because of where I live, but I think it has to do with frankly, the neighborhoods, all of the infrastructure here is a lot older than it is in Nevada, in southern Nevada. Because Las Vegas is a relatively new American city, relative. Of course, with the big boom that they've had in the last 20 years. Here where I live in Florida, kind of an older community that's more situated. And so everything, the infrastructure is just a little bit older. So we had a big storm roll through, and when it happens, you can pretty much guarantee the cable's going to go out, the power's going to go out, going to flicker, stay off for a little while, come back on. You don't know what it's going to do. Also have to say that this is the first show that I'm doing. I did not do any notes for it, so that should tell you where my head is today. And, of course, by the time you're listening to this, it's been over 24 hours since Donald Trump rolled through Indiana, and then on top of that, Ted Cruz decided to suspend his campaign, which we all know what that means, quit his campaign. But to do that, there's certain legal things that have to be done if he says he quits, in contrast to just suspends. And so that's where my head is today. And being that I've been talking about it for so long, as is most people and all people, I guess, on Red State Talk Radio, and a lot of people who don't even do shows, I really didn't feel like I needed to write down any notes. I think that I can fill these next 50 minutes up with my feelings, my thoughts about what all went down. Let me first start with Ted Cruz and him choosing to suspend his campaign, which I guess I'm a little surprised by it. I mean, when I didn't even find out through a news item. I actually had a friend of mine that sent me a message last night. What was really interesting about what was going on last night, as Ted Cruz was getting his butt kicked in Indiana, my Pirates are getting their butt kicked by the Chicago Cubs and Jake Arrieta. And needless to say, I could see some similarities between both, and maybe we'll get into that. But a friend of mine sent that to me, and when I read it, I didn't sit up in my chair and say, "You got to be kidding me." I was not surprised. And I'll tell you, even though it seems among those people who have been Trump or Cruz supporters, they have been surprised, and they still continue to be surprised. I was not surprised, and I'll tell you why. And it had something to do with what I saw from that video on Monday when he was standing there talking to that Trump supporter, a guy who, let's just say, was completely mindless. And Cruz spent 7 minutes with him. And seeing the expression on Ted Cruz's face, his body language, and that guy just standing there and smiling at him. And I had said yesterday that I thought that was kind of strange. It was kind of a bad move on Ted Cruz's part. I said that I compared it to those conservatives that go to these college campuses and spend hours upon hours talking to a bunch of brats. And I think that I'm sure it happened before that conversation that Ted Cruz had with that guy. But I'm sure that late at night, when he's going to bed on the road in some hotel and his wife's with him and they're just talking just between the two of them, things that'll never get out. Things that'll never, he probably would never even say to his campaign manager, his best friend, but he'll talk to his wife about it. He's probably just saying, you know what, maybe these people just deserve Donald Trump. Okay, now for you Donald Trump supporters, you absolutely think that the United States deserves him because you think it's going to make the United States better. I know, I get it. But there has to be, I know because it's gone through my head, and I don't believe that my brain is so much different than Ted Cruz's. I'd probably believe that not only do we think a lot of the same ways about government and freedom and rights and liberty, but the way our brains work are very much the same thing. And probably that's why I've been able to identify with him fairly well, even though I've been fairly critical of him as too. And I've told you, I didn't send any money to him. I didn't call anybody about him. I didn't ask anybody to vote for him. Nothing. I've just told you on this show over these last 6 months that I thought he was the most conservative of the group, and then he was just happened to be the one still standing in contrast to oppose Donald Trump, and I don't even want to talk about John Kasich. But getting back to Ted Cruz being alone at home or on the road at some hotel, probably just says to his wife, you know what? It's not my job to save the American people. Okay? And after a few minutes of talking back and forth with this friend of mine who told me that Ted Cruz dropped out, and I had a lot of things to say about it, a lot which you're going to hear today or tonight. That's what I finally got to. Some people just don't see the help that is trying to be given them. All right? But in the end, it's not what it comes down to use horrible cliches, because I can't think of anything else right at this second. It's not Ted Cruz's job to save us. The problem is that Trump supporters, and dare I say it, Hillary supporters and Bernie Sanders supporters, they want saviors. They want somebody, a politician, to come in and save them. And that is not the role of politicians or political leaders in our government system. But it seems the people, a majority of the people in the United States on both sides of the aisle, whether no matter how conservative they are or how liberal they are, that they want a savior. Somebody that can just seemingly come in and fix everything. And that's not the way it works. And I contrast this with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was not a savior. He did not see himself as a savior. The only savior that he believed in was Jesus Christ. Whether you believe in that or not, Ronald Reagan did. He did not see himself in the administration that he was going to be bringing in as to come in and save the American people. You know what Ronald Reagan thought about the American people. He thought to get government out of the way, and people will be able to save themselves. That's different. That's a different attitude than what we now have in the United States. Now, what the problem is with all of this is for the last 7 years, over 7 years, we have had a guy in office who has been called the One. People have compared him to Jesus Christ. People have called him a savior. People have treated him like some non-human but godly figure. And we've seen what has happened. All right? We've seen it. It has not gotten better. All you have to do is look at your health premium, for example. Just one example. All you have to do is look at the military, another example. All you have to do is look at the transgendered bathroom arguments that we are now having. That's what happens when a person gets into office and people want him to be a savior. And that politician is more than happy to fill that void, if you want to call it that. Somebody, a guy who has enough ego to say, hey, you want a savior? I'll be your savior. Whereas the truly humble man or woman will say, you want a savior? I'm just a human. I can't be your savior. And that's the kind of person that you need as a leader. Because with as much power that we have given the federal government, when you start getting politicians in there who think that they are saviors, it's just one step away from a dictatorship, which sounds to me like what Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders would love. And getting back to Ted Cruz, I don't think that he's ever felt that way. But standing there, looking at him, arguing with that guy, I felt sorry for both of them. I felt sorry for this guy who I know wants a savior, believes Donald Trump is that savior, and that guy is going to be let down. If he thinks that he's ticked off now, you just wait. He's going to become even more jaded, and it's just going to get worse. Because there's nothing within that guy or many Trump supporters who believe that they can save themselves. In fact, we know what they want. They think that they're being cheated by the Chinese. They think that they're being cheated by the Mexicans. They think that they're being cheated by big business and CEOs and Wall Street. And pretty much none of it is true. pretty much none of it is true. How do I know that? Because they keep buying all that stuff from China and they love it. But they hate China at the same time. A lot of these people who have jobs, have 401ks and IRAs, guess the reason that those actually go up in value. You know why? Because of Wall Street, because of corporations, because of investments. All the people that Donald Trump has been trashing for the last 8 months. But somehow these people still think that they need a savior. And I come back to the point of Ted Cruz, I think well before that talk on Monday, decided, you know what? I'm going to keep giving it the college try. A lot of people had voted for me. I still have money. Maybe we can pull out something in Indiana. But in the end, it is not my job to save these people. It's not his job. But the problem is that we don't have any politicians, and I know Ted Cruz tried to do it, but he was one of the few of even all of the Republicans that ran none of them can come out and expressly state, it's not my job to save you. You're wanting stuff from us. It is not our job to save you. It is our job actually to get government out of the way. But even that, among many hardcore conservatives, is like scare words. Because it makes you sound like you don't want to do anything. This, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, remember those Hayek versus Keynes videos, those rap tunes that came out? They were put together by Russ Roberts at Econ Talk, along with some other guys, filmmakers, and they're still beautiful. Two videos. There were just two of them, but they were so well done, and they've seen millions and millions of times on YouTube. You should check those out. Just do a search for Hayek Keynes rap, and you'll find them. I think they're also at econstories.tv, I think. Is that site even still up? I haven't been there recently. But there's a part in the second one where the Keynes character says something, I'm just not going to stand around. I'm going to get in there, and, if I see somebody that needs help, I'm going to do this. And, of course, that's where we get Keynesian economics, pumping up the economy, quantitative easing, QE1, QE2, QE3, all ideas that were somewhat started with John Maynard Keynes going way back. Whereas in that same video, it's once again this back and forth argument between the two of them in a rap setting, hip hop setting. Something. Can you still say rap these days? Hip hop / rap setting. The Hayek figure makes the argument that the role of government is to get out of the way so people can figure out how to provide for each other, which is a different kind of thinking. And sometimes it means that government should do nothing. But talking about government doing nothing is not in style now. It's not. And you can't even talk about rolling anything back. You can't even talk about just keeping things the way they are. And it's, as I've made the point for a while now, that if we were to come out today and say there wasn't going to be one more law passed in the United States at the local, state, or federal level, you'd see the unemployment rate go down to about 2% in 6 months. If businesses knew that no new taxes were coming, no new regulations were coming, it wouldn't even have to go the opposite way. That the minimum wage wasn't going to go up, it wasn't going to go down, but it's not going to go up. You would see a boom like you've never seen in this country, just given that. But we can't even do that. Why? Because a lot of people want that intrusion. On both sides of the aisle. They both want government to do something. We know what the left wants, and now I guess we're finding out what some on the right want. those conservatives who have bought in to Donald Trump and all those others people who think that they're conservative and think that Donald Trump is conservative. So very well may be that this has all been going through Ted Cruz's head. I'm going to guess for a while. I'm going to guess that he knew it was going to happen, no matter what we might have been thinking out here, that the momentum, if you want to call it that, I don't personally believe in that, but I think the problem was that when Ted Cruz, he gave too much time to Donald Trump in those 2 weeks in New York and in the Northeast. That was a big part of the problem. We can talk about John Kasich and how he got in Ted Cruz's way, and that's part of it as well. Don't get me wrong. But Donald Trump dominated those 2 weeks for a little bit too much time, and I think that people in Indiana, some of them gave in. And once again, some of it is Ted Cruz's fault. But if those people were going to give in to something that they were opposing for so long, I don't know what to tell you. Either something is right or it's wrong. Something that's wrong doesn't gradually become right just because of time passing. But it seems to me that that's what went on in Indiana. And Cruz probably saw that and tried to fight against it. And I even told you in the days leading up to yesterday that Indiana is not Wisconsin. It's not Utah. It's not Texas. It's not Iowa. It's not some of these other states that Ted Cruz won. It's not. I think what you saw with that guy arguing with Ted Cruz for those 7 minutes is pretty much your stereotypical Indiana voter. I don't know that guy. He seems like a jerk to me, but I'm sure all of his friends love him. I was listening to Andrew Klavan's show. He's another author like I am. He's sold a few more books than I have. But he also does a political show. It's very rare for a novelist to do a political podcast, whether on the right or on the left. And as you probably already realize that most authors in the world are not conservative. Some of the best ones in American history are conservative. Tom Wolfe being a most recent example, but most are on the left. But none of them, to my knowledge, does a political podcast like I do here. But Andrew Klavan does. He's a right-winger like I am. He's also part of the Never Trump crowd like I am. And he made the joke upon seeing that video from Monday with Ted Cruz and that guy, those 7 minutes that happened, that it looks like Donald Trump is getting the Oxycontin vote. You know what Oxycontin? It's like the legal version of heroin, and it's just to bring it up. It's the drug that Rush Limbaugh was abusing, was doctor shopping, if you remember. And he's not the only one. A lot of famous people have done that. It's a pain medication that's very addictive, and it's easier to get than heroin is. So a lot of people get hopped up on that. Oxycontin is one of the reasons that suicides are up in this country. It's one of the reasons. Is it not an opioid? And we know all about opioids recently with the rumors that that's the reason that Prince died. And Andrew Klavan made the joke in seeing that guy, what looks like getting Donald Trump is getting the Oxycontin vote. I don't know that guy Ted Cruz is talking to. I'm hoping that guy has no addictions. I'm hoping that that guy, as much as I think he's an idiot, I hope he lives to be 100 years old. But this comes down to something else, too. And I'm sure this is something else that Ted Cruz was going through his head probably for weeks, if not months. And it goes back to what I was talking about regarding the movie Election. I think I mentioned this yesterday. And I passed this along to this friend of mine back and forth last night. And I was amazed, but this guy who is pretty well versed in movies has never seen Election with Matthew Broderick or Reese Witherspoon, which is a movie that's almost 20 years old now. But I told him, you got to see it. And then you understand what I'm talking about here. Is that Ted Cruz, I'm sure over these months, has gotten very frustrated with, the voters have frustrated him something fierce. You can say Dennis Miller, like I talked about recently, can say all he wants about Ted Cruz. All these other people can talk about Ted Cruz being this and being that. But the credit I give to Ted Cruz is when he gives these speeches, he was trying to educate people about the way the government should be and it should be run. But time after time, them voting for Donald Trump or John Kasich or whoever else, that's going to get to any person no matter what. No matter how sunny your disposition, no matter how much positive thinking you do, no matter self-actualization and praying and everything else, at some point at night, talking to your wife, you're going to say, you know what? These voters are just morons. And I remind you, that is exactly the theme in the movie Election. It is not about the behind the scenes and how politicians cheat, as some people think the movie Election about. It's really about a bunch of, now granted it's kids in this movie, but it's a bunch of people who vote for a girl who is obviously a nasty, fake B-I-T-C-H, and I can't say it, the B word. She's obviously that, and these kids still vote for her. And in fact, there are a lot of good kids, as you will see in that film, otherwise good kids who are friends with her, even though she is as snobby can get. Mm-hmm. She is the foul one, and the kids still vote for her. Granted, she wins by one vote, not to ruin the ending. Over the jock guy who is asked to participate is a nice guy, just wants everybody to get along together, and doesn't want to be nasty to her. And in fact, in the movie, when it goes in for him to vote, he has no ego. He doesn't even think he'd be the best person for the job. He votes for her, and it's actually the vote that causes her to win. It's really about people and voters. That movie is not necessarily about politicians and them being underhanded. But that's something that it's not appropriate to talk about in the United States. The reason that we are in this position in the United States is because of voters, not politicians. But nobody wants to hear that. Politicians can't say that because they need votes. But whether you are on the right or the left, if you look at this country and you don't like it, it's because of voters. I can say it on this show because I'm not looking for voters. I'm not running for office. And this is the exact reason I couldn't run for office, because this would surely come out of my mouth. I wouldn't pick out any particular voter out by name, but voters are the reason that this all happens. But the problem is that we have elevated voting and voters as being the most sacred part of our entire country. Is, you know what? They now have egos that you could say are even bigger than the politicians. They want what they want. And this time around, as they wanted in 2008 and 2012, they want a savior. And our side, that has taken the form of Donald Trump. And I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. Let me continue. Once again, no notes today. None. There was something that I thought of another part that I thought of besides that maybe Ted Cruz just being fed up with the whole entire thing. Maybe he's thinking that it's just not our time. It's just not his time. It's just not conservatives' time. I wrote to this friend of mine saying that it very well may just be that the United States just isn't tired enough yet. It wants to, the American people, it seems, want to keep drinking and want to continue to be alcoholics. And just like you know alcoholics in your life, you know that there's nothing that you can say to them that is going to change their mind. Alcoholics that finally get help do it on their own. There's something that happens. Maybe it's a big deal. Maybe it's a DUI. Something like that. Maybe they pass out and wake up someplace they don't, they get scared straight. And then others, they just wake up one day and maybe they do it because of their kids or because of their marriage, their job, and they go get the help. And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. Some of them just get tired of being tired. It's obvious the United States isn't there yet. I wrote this to this friend of mine, and that's an analogy that I've used on this show before. That in the end, I hate using that cliche, but eventually, people are going to have to figure out that we are the problem. Unfortunately, we've convinced ourselves that our problems lie elsewhere. I'm not saying Washington, D.C. is perfect. It's not. But every one of those people there could be voted out this November. Every single one. Except for some senators who aren't up for re-election. But every person in Congress is up for re-election come November. And you know what? A large majority of them will get voted back in. All right? Granted, Barack Obama can't run again, so he's term limited. If he could run again for a third term, people would have an opportunity to kick him out of office. But a high percentage of politicians in Washington and D.C. are going to be up for re-election this time, and most of them are going to get re-elected. Whose fault's that? People can't say they don't know. We know what the opinion of Congress is in the United States. It's in single digits. Still, most of them get re-elected. Now, whose fault's that? Is that Congress's fault, or is that voters' fault? As I read last night, Kevin Williamson at National Review, he posted something, and it was just very short, but it was to the point. He said, just remember, you Republicans, you asked for this. You have chosen freely to elect a con man, to nominate a con man. Of your own will, you've done it. It hasn't been Mitch McConnell, hasn't been John Boehner, hasn't been Barack Obama, hasn't been anybody else. You went in there and you voted for this guy. And it's no different than what I said in 2008 and 2012. Everybody's so ticked off about the Republican Party and the so-called establishment. It was a bunch of regular people that went in the nomination process that went in and voted for John McCain and Mitt Romney. And there was nothing that anybody did or forced any of these people to do it. But somehow these people who do these things never want to take any blame for it. Why? Well, I'm voting. I'm doing my duty. How dare you give me a problem? Once again, that's why I'm not a big voting guy. And I make fun of those people who walk around with their little patches saying, I voted. There is nothing admirable about voting for somebody and disliking the person and then voting for the person again. There's nothing admirable in that. Fool you once? Okay. But John McCain, we knew he was. People voted for him anyway. Mitt Romney, knew he was. Voted for him anyway. Donald Trump, knew who he was. Voted for him anyway. I don't know what to tell you. Whose fault's that? This is the exact reason that, getting back to the Founding Fathers, and there were divisions between each of them. There was like the Alexander Hamilton side, and of course the Aaron Burr side, and the Thomas Jefferson side, and all these different factions, and that's how these parties were created, political parties were created. That's why I'm not afraid to tell you, I fall a little bit more to the elite side. I'm not going to argue with you in that. When people make decisions like they do, and then don't realize or aren't willing to own up to the mistake after the fact. And that's really the real problem. And they won't own up for hating Congress, but voting for the same people over and over and over. That's why, once again, that's the main reason I don't give Mitch McConnell as hard a time as I do. You know what? He keeps getting reelected in Kentucky. Whose fault's that? I don't live in Kentucky. I can't vote for him or against him. John Boehner's from Ohio. I know he's gone now. But who kept voting for him despite people disliking him? Denny Hastert. Who voted for him, the child molester that he was? Not me. Not me. It can drive you nuts. You stand here and think about it long enough. But at some point, and I've told you, this is the reason that I think that where conservative media has gotten it wrong. Well before Donald Trump came along. Well before that. At some point, those people who were listening to Mark Levin, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, going back to 2008, 2006, 2004, going way back, those listeners should have been given a harder time. But they aren't. Why? Well, those guys and women, Laura Ingraham, the rest of them, need listeners. And when you start giving your listeners a hard time, you start losing them. And saying, you know what, if you're conservative and sending your kids to public schools, you're killing us. You've heard me say that before. You're never going to hear that on any of their shows. Not now, not 10 years ago, not now, not ever. Because people don't like hearing that stuff. If you're taking that government grant, you're killing us, the rest of us conservatives. You're not going to hear that because they don't want to lose. They know how many people have to rely on government grants and everything for their jobs, and they don't want to lose listeners. So they're not going to do that. And it all culminates into something like this. You combine that with people wanting to be famous for no reason, no talent, no skills, nothing, just because they can be outrageous to get on TV. Reality TV, which is something I predicted 15 years ago, was horrible for the culture in the United States. It's going to turn everybody into a person who wants to be a celebrity for no reason. No special skills, no special talents, no singing talents, no instrument talents, no painting talents, no acting talents. They just want to be and be famous. Well, we're going to see how that works. Donald Trump has no special skills. None. The work that has been done in his businesses over the years have been done by other people. And in fact, the things that he's had his hands on personally have tanked. Even with his reality show, guess what? He wasn't the one that was writing the script for that reality show. He's just showing up. It was somebody else that came out with the idea for the show and just wanted to include him in it. But we're going to see. We're going to see. There's another part to this, and this is also something I was talking to my friend about. With probably the weird part about all of this is up until just a few days ago, Ted Cruz and his people were trying to get delegates in these other states. We were here; those stories seem to come out every day. Cruz people in this state, quote unquote, stealing delegates from Donald Trump, continuing. And then after he loses Indiana yesterday, he suspends his campaign. Now, I don't know what that means regarding delegates in some of these other states that have already gone but still have to be picked and everything. I don't know regarding that. It just seems like a weird, kind of strange. Like you got all these people to do all this work and then you lose one state and you quit. You suspend your campaign. Because if I know, for example, what happened in 1976, then Ted Cruz surely knows what happened in 1976, where Ronald Reagan went the whole way to the convention, even though the odds of him winning were not good. I kind of saw something like that happening. Ted Cruz has decided not to take the 1976 Ronald Reagan path. Now, it may be this, and this is something that I'm just going to throw out there as to why he chose to suspend his campaign. It very well may be, see, you've heard me use the analogy of the parents who have that 16, 17-year-old daughter who is dating that boy that the parents don't like. They find out she's dating some kid that's maybe, some guy that's not even in high school anymore. He's 19, 20 years old. Maybe he's had a few brushes with the law. He's not violent or anything like that, but he's a little suspicious. And we all know that the more parents will try to tell their daughter that that daughter shouldn't be with that guy, the more the daughter is going to sneak out at 2 a.m. to see him and ride around on his motorcycle, flying up and down the streets on school nights. The more that the parents do that, the more a teenager, a girl, guys do it too, but I think this is more of a girl thing, are going to do that. And in fact, the best thing a parent can do in those circumstances is just cross their fingers and hope, you know what? Let's hope this is just a phase. Let's hope that the values that we've instilled in our daughter about education, about being moral, that those continue to be in her head, even though she's with this guy. Hope she doesn't get pregnant. Hope he doesn't beat her up. Hopefully, if anything that even come close to that happening, we hope that she kills this guy. But she's out there having fun, and it seems the more we try to get in the way of her fun, the more she wants to have it. So we're just going to have to cross our fingers. We're going to treat her with respect. If she's lips off to any of us, we'll do what we can. But the more we talk about this boy, the more she wants to be with him. And this may very well be what's going on, that Ted Cruz maybe suspects is going on right now. The more that he talks badly about Donald Trump and opposes him, it seems more people are being driven to Donald Trump. Doesn't matter that, once again, in the parents' analogy, the parents are absolutely correct. They should be worried about their daughter. They are trying to be good parents. They're telling her the truth. They're showing her respect. They're warning her about what can happen, and it's all truthful. They're not being overbearing, but still the information is having the wrong effect in the end. No matter what their intentions are, it's having the opposite effect of their intentions. And Ted Cruz may be looking at what has been going on for the last 2 weeks and kind of saying the same thing. The more truthful I am about Donald Trump, the more people seem to like him. And so Ted Cruz may be taking that parental approach where he's going to say, you know what? Fine, have it your way. Just like the parents say, you want to go with this guy? Okay. We're not going to support it. We're not going to invite him over for dinner, but we're not going to oppose it either. Have fun with that. Once again, the parents, of course, being very cool on the exterior, but inside their heart rate's up at like 200 beats per minute, and they're just hoping something wrong doesn't happen. But they know they have no other choice. They can't handcuff her to her bed. They can't handcuff her to, in the bathroom or in the closet or something. Ted Cruz may be coming to the same conclusion. That I've said all the truth I can about Donald Trump and it hasn't worked. So maybe these people just deserve to see what Donald Trump is like when I'm not around. When there's no checks on him anymore. When he doesn't have to argue with me and somehow make himself look better than I am. And it could be when Donald Trump, being that he now has no people to run against on the Republican side, now they'll get to see what Donald Trump in the general election, what he's going to be like. And I think Ted Cruz may be making the calculation that people will get frustrated with him very quickly. Not his hardcore supporters. They're not going anywhere. But a lot of these people, for example, in Indiana, who came to Donald Trump very late, who were not Donald Trump supporters when this all started back last summer. But as these other candidates tended to drop out and it seemed like Donald Trump was more inevitable, they just said, heck, I guess we got to just go vote for Donald Trump and try to unify this whole thing. Those are the people I think that Ted Cruz is thinking, those people are still pretty. I know they didn't vote for me yesterday. But it may be those people, as they see things go from May into June into July, and Donald Trump doesn't have anybody to argue with anymore, except make fun of Hillary Clinton. And we'll see how well he does with that. Maybe some of these people will end up seeing the error in their ways, and maybe I can use that to my advantage at the convention. Because it seems to me the longer I stay in this, the more powerful Ted Cruz gets. Once again, going back to that parental versus daughter analogy. Because we all know that's true. We've all been there in our lives trying to speak truth to somebody. And it's not some subjective truth. It's objective truth. Maybe that drunk alcohol example is a good one. You know you keep drinking, you're going to kill yourself. And it seems to just make that person drink more. And you just have to maybe change it up. If you want to drink, I really don't care. I'm not going to go buy you beers or anything. But I'm not going to get in the way of it either. You want to do that? Go ahead. And sometimes that'll be enough to smarten some people up. We've all been there in our lives. With girlfriends and boyfriends and doing things. You start telling them the truth, and it seems that it just makes them want to do something else even more. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just to shut up. And let the chips fall where they may, to use a horrible cliche. There is a part of me, because, my idea is that Ted Cruz, at least it seems to me, always has a plan. That doesn't mean it's going to work or not. We know that there were some plans that he had for this election season that didn't go as planned. Well, guess what? That could be said for just about anybody in that campaign, including Donald Trump. A lot of things didn't go as planned for Donald Trump. He thought he was going to win in some places and didn't. And I wouldn't say, he did win in some places unexpectedly. You know what? Ted Cruz did that too. So there was a lot of pluses and minuses for every candidate. Just like in a baseball season. A lot of pluses and minuses during a baseball season too. Winning streaks, losing streaks. In the end, only one team gets to win the World Series. That's it. Now, it seems for the time being that that's going to be Donald Trump. And we're just going to have to live with it. But there's a part of me, once again, that I say that Ted Cruz, I don't believe he just suspended his campaign and said that's it. He may take a couple days off, But I think that at some point before Saturday, he's going to get with his campaign manager and some of his other close people and talk about what can be done. Because nothing's changed. He knows nothing's changed. He still believes, as a lot of us still believe, that Donald Trump is not just a disaster in the general election. He's a disaster for the party, for conservatism, for the country. This isn't just a point of losing an election like Mitt Romney in 2012. There is a lot more going on here, whether Trump supporters want to see it or not. One more point before I leave you tonight. What does this mean for the average conservative? I consider myself to be that person. I've told you that. I don't have any special knowledge. I don't have any special contacts. I am an average conservative, just like you are. I just happen to have more time to go through the news and talk about it. That's it. We're going to have to reassess. This is no different than a team that was supposed to win the Super Bowl and gets its butt kicked. Maybe like the Carolina Panthers this past year, losing to Peyton Manning. There have been other upsets in other sports that have happened where teams have to go back and reassess what happened. And the only way you can do that, though, is being very, very brutally honest with yourself. And it's just not in politics or sports. People who get divorced. You know, a guy gets divorced, sitting in his little one-room apartment after, his wife left him and she got the house and everything. If you're going to be honest, you have to look at yourself too. You can't just blame it on her, as so many people want to do. You at least have to look at yourself and say, what are my mistakes? What are my flaws? What did I do wrong? And the first thing that I think of is the conservative leadership in private industry has to change. This has been a mantra of mine going on 6 months now. And probably I believed it even before that. I just didn't want to talk about it. That these people are not reliable leaders when things get tough. They will go off in their own personal directions because of friendships over here, friendships over there, golfing with Donald Trump, having dinner with Donald Trump, getting ratings because of Donald Trump. And because of that, they cannot lead us anymore. All right, if they're going to say that they're conservative leaders, then the people they support have to be conservative. That's the only thing that matters, because otherwise they're just entertainers. But they don't think of themselves that way. So we shouldn't think of themselves that way. They think that they're political leaders. They shouldn't be our political leaders anymore. That is a first big point. Another point, and it's something that I've been saying well before Donald Trump started running for president, we as conservatives have to figure out how to start making new arguments for the reasons, for the way we think. Not change our values, not changing how we feel about taxes or abortion or anything like that. We need new arguments. We've been using the same arguments for 20 years now, and it's just gotten a little old. Conservatism has gotten a little stale. There's a reason that sports teams get rid of their coaches once in a while. Switch it up, especially if they're not successful. Conservatism has not been successful. We need new eyes on all of this. We need new ideas, not changing our values. But those are two points that I'd like to make, and I'm sure I'll talk about more of that as the show continues. You can go to edwarddentzel.com where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also find them at Podbean, Podomatic, SoundCloud, and YouTube. edwarddentzel.com/book where you can download for free the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com, Twitter, Dentzel Domain, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. I can assure you everything's going to be fine. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.